Today's presenter is Lucidworks CTO and co-founder and Lucene Solr committer, Grant Ingersoll. Thanks for joining us today, Grant.
Thanks, Aaliyah, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, as you can hopefully see on your screen, I wanted to just make sure everyone's aware that we have our annual conference, Lucene Solr Revolution, coming up this year. It's in September and it's in Las Vegas. So if you like what you hear today, or you want to learn more about Solr and Fusion and Spark and all of the good things we have going here at Lucidworks, that's 2 days of very deep technical talks, lots and lots of people just like you working on search, trying to make search better, trying to adapt Solr and Fusion for their applications. And so it's a great opportunity to get together and meet with them, as well as have a good time in Las Vegas. So if you haven't registered already, I believe we have early bird discounts up right now, and so you can save yourself a little money as well. So with that, as Aaliyah said, today we're going to talk about e-commerce, and we're going to talk about a number of things, some of the trends I see happening in e-commerce, as well as how Lucidworks Fusion can be used to improve, at the end of the day, ultimately the thing everybody in e-commerce cares about: improve conversions, improve customer satisfaction. I'm also going to give you just a little taste of some of what's coming in Fusion 3.1, which is due out in a couple of weeks here. In particular, some of the things we're doing with machine learning these days and how they apply to e-commerce. So I want to start off with just taking a step back and thinking about e-commerce search. And in my role as CTO, one of the things I do a lot of is go visit with a lot of different customers, prospects, people doing search, wanting to make search better. And one thing comes across time and time again, and that is a lot of, especially e-commerce sites, are underperforming when it comes to search. And I think they're underperforming for a variety of reasons, but some of the highlights of those reasons are, first and foremost, everywhere I go, there's this really complicated process for understanding how users interact with the site. If you look at many of these even the large retailers, there's often this workflow that goes something like the IT side of the shop puts up their search site, puts up the application, etc. They've got all their cookie trackers on, things like Omniture and Site Catalyst, Google Analytics, etc. That data about how users are interacting with the site all flows into marketing. From marketing, there's often a long process that then flows it into maybe a data science group, maybe a business analyst group, maybe into engineering. They then take and crunch the numbers. They look at different ways people are interacting with the site. They maybe build some models that look promising, and everybody in the business then jumps up and down and says, oh, well, let's get these great new models into production. Engineering takes a look at those data science models and said, yeah, not so fast. It's going to take us 4 months in order to make those be production ready, make sure that they can scale to meet all of our demands during Black Friday and all of that kind of stuff. And then finally, some period of time later, that new model gets in place and everybody else has already moved on. And so it's just this long and laborious process. Number two, what I often see is that the cost of experimentation is too high and it's too manual. A lot of companies, they'll have support for A/B testing or multivariate testing built into their stack, but the ability to then go and execute and gather results on those tests is too far in between, too few and too far in between to actually really drive kind of that micro gain capabilities that you often see out of the best and the brightest in the e-commerce space. Third, and this one is always really interesting to me, I can't tell you the number of companies I go into where they're essentially paying a third-party vendor to sell them their data back to them. So for instance, they might be working with a third-party hosted recommendation system. All of this data about what users are doing, what they're clicking on, what they're buying, et cetera, is shipped up off to that third-party service. That third-party service does some modeling behind the scenes, has a black box interface, and then serves back up recommendations, maybe gives them a few charts and dashboards. But for the most part, there's this really opaque process whereby you're essentially buying back your data from people that you're paying, right? And then last but not least, the reality is these days there's quite a large gap between the best in this space, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Bings, et cetera, and the rest of us. And so with what we've been trying to accomplish here at Lucidworks is to really address via Lucidworks Fusion all of those shortcomings in the e-commerce space. And we're doing that primarily by delivering a product called Lucidworks Fusion. We're on 3.0 these days, and I'll cover what's involved in that here in a minute. But what I wanted to do first was just showcase how some of those things that we talked about earlier are addressed by Fusion. So I want to start off with a couple of use cases. The first one is we've been working with a pretty large travel destination site for some time now. And one of the things that's been great in working with them is search is a really critical part of their infrastructure. And so we've been working with them to deploy Fusion across that. I'll let you read the numbers for yourself, but at the end of the day, you know, up and to the right in terms of conversion, up and to the right in terms of people who are actually interacting with search, leading to more advanced sales or more sales, people interacting or people seeing that Fusion is driving a lot more engagement with the site, as well as people are leaving the site less often, right? So all in all of the metrics across this entire site, once they switch to Fusion, really going in the right direction. Another similar example, this time much more in the traditional retail. We've been working with a mid-sized home improvement retailer, and again, it's a very similar story. The especially interesting thing about this story, as you can see, is a large percentage of their revenue comes from search, and they serve up quite a bit of traffic. And at the end of the day, taking Fusion, adding in these things called signals, which I'll talk about here in a minute, has really helped drive conversions such that this is adding multiple or double-digit millions of dollars to their bottom line every year. And the best part about this use case as well is really Fusion is the data science engine in here. Not only is Fusion driving the front-end production system, but it's also driving the back-end analytics in terms of helping understand what's going on with the customer, how they're interacting with it. So that's just two quick use cases of how Fusion has been especially effective in the e-commerce space and helping drive conversion. What I thought then I would do is jump in and talk a little bit about what's behind the scenes in Fusion, and then we're going to finish up with a demo that showcases a number of these capabilities that I'm talking about. So when it comes to Fusion, I like to think about it being built on really three, or in this case these days, four key principles, and I'll talk about the fourth here in a minute because that's new if you've heard me talk about this in the past, so stay tuned for that. The first one really is one of the things we're trying to do with Fusion is make it super easy for you to capture how users are interacting with your content. And to really then turn that around into better relevance, better analytics, better personalization, better ultimately insight into what drives traffic and how to improve it. And so one of the first things we did when building Fusion is look at how can we capture user signals and deploy that right back into the application. So that whole big round trip that I talked about at the beginning of, going from marketing to data science to engineering, engineering to production, we believe with Fusion we can short circuit a lot of that by having all of that data in one place. And the beauty of all of that is that the same data that makes for better search is the same data that makes for recommendations, it's the same data that makes for personalization, and it's the same data that drives your internal analytics. And oh, by the way we do this with Fusion, you get to use all of the features and functions of Solr. All of that data is instantly searchable, facetable, and all of the other things that one would want to do with data that's in a database. Other highlights of what we have on Fusion, we have rules for the cases where you do need them. We try to put those rules into context by making sure that those rules have a lifetime, making sure that you understand how and whether and how they are being effective. And ultimately with Fusion, we want to take the guesswork out of improving relevance. I've been a search engineer for a long, long time. I've spent many a days, many a years, in fact, tuning relevance in systems. One of the things we want to try to do is really reduce the amount of manual work that's involved in tuning, but of course still give you that, proverbial hammer in the cases where you do need it. And then just make sure that you can measure and manage that relevance. The second key principle behind Fusion, hey, we've been at this search thing at Lucidworks for a long time. We do a lot of work to just take all of that plumbing that you used to have to build and put it into Fusion. Things like connectors and security and ETL and all of those good pieces. Put them all into Fusion, add them into things like pipelines and all of that, such that you can then turn around and build applications in days or weeks as opposed to months and years. The last bit with Fusion really is we build out on trusted technologies. You probably know us as the Solr people. These days, we extend that out quite a bit with other technologies like Spark. That's where we really leverage its ability to do things like machine learning or large-scale distributed computation so that we can enhance our understanding of the content. With our recent Fusion 3.0 release, we also added in SQL support. And this is a real boon to a lot of the business analysts and merchandisers and non-technical users in your typical e-commerce shop, because now all of those tools like your Tableaus, your Power BIs, your Clicks, your reporting tools that work off of SQL or work off of JDBC or ODBC all work with Fusion. So again, having all of that data in the analytics cluster, it's now available via search. It's now also available to all of your dashboarding and reporting tools. I said before that I think about Fusion being founded on 3 pieces. We just recently added the 4th piece, and that's really centered around the UI. We did a webinar last week if you want to learn more about this, but we just recently acquired a company called TwigKit based out of the United Kingdom. And what TwigKit does is make it easy for you to build beautiful UIs. It really allows you to essentially lay down HTML tags on the page and say, hey, I want a search box here, I want facets here, I want search results here, I want type ahead here, without having to write all of the code. It's highly performant. It knows how to talk to Fusion amongst other applications. It does search UI best practices through and through. And so with this, we think we can deliver user interfaces much faster, much richer, and really help our customers get to production a lot faster. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to our website or you can go to twigkit.com and find out more about our UI kit. So that's kind of the high level. I haven't talked about retail a lot just yet, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time getting into some of the highlights in Fusion that I think specifically serve the retail market. Before I do that, I want to highlight the quote here, which I think is, in all the years that I've been at this company, I'm one of the founders, been here going on 10 years, it's probably single-handedly the best compliment I've ever received in running the business here. And that's from one of the top 5 retailers out there who, right before Black Friday, simply said to our support team, have a good weekend. And for those of you in retail, you know how big of a deal that is. I mean, essentially, it was them saying, hey, we've got all of our ducks in the row. We've done all of our prep work. You really helped us back in July, back in August. We feel really strong about where we're at operationally. You've helped us do all the load testing, all the relevance testing, the endurance testing, all of that. so much so that going into their single busiest weekend, they told us, have a good weekend. Now, of course, we still had all of our people on support ready to help them if they needed, as we do with all of our e-commerce customers. But to me, that's the ultimate vote of confidence from a customer going into their busiest traffic season. So with that, obviously DevOps is a pretty important part of retail. We want to make sure that you never go down. And I think you can see, having built out on Solr and Spark and building all this out in Fusion, that's one of the things we care most about when it comes to retail. But beyond that, I put up a little bit of a chart here just highlighting some of the many of the pieces that overall fit into what I consider the e-commerce stack. And I'm going to pick out a few of these here as we go and get into a bunch of details on them. But as you can see, I think one of the things we try to address with Fusion is scaling across the entire e-commerce stack, not just the IT side of the house, but also the business side of the house. At the very base here, we start with an open and scalable platform. If you've been in retail search for any amount of time, you know that Solr is the flagship retail search system out there. We're the people who build that, so we know that we have this proven engine that scales to handle hundreds of thousands of queries per second, millions or billions of documents, and that it's extensible, it's real time, and that the operations of this are very straightforward, very well understood, and proven out. Then with Fusion, we start to add on top of it some intelligence layers that really are designed to help data scientists and search engineers more quickly deploy higher quality algorithms on top of that search. So things like our signal processing capabilities, our machine learning capabilities, smarter auto-suggest, query intent capabilities, all built into an intelligence layer that you can use as kind of a set of building blocks if you want to extend your capabilities in relevance. On top of those, we have a business layer that's really designed to help business analysts, merchandisers, CEOs, whomever is involved on the business side of the equation, better understand what's going on with the system. So things like being able to simulate what's happening if you change how queries are done, if you want to set up experiments, those kinds of things. Tools for helping you manage your content, things like categories and facets, and as well as rules for things like landing pages and all of that kind of stuff. And then on top of all that, kind of that last slice, if you will, really geared towards helping you get to the next level in terms of, ultimately revenue. So tools like personalization, recommendations, pipelines and analytics and capabilities around helping you get more out of your head and tail queries. And then also things like, your traditional rule-based things of, landing pages, boosts and blocks and all of that. So with that, what I thought I would do is dig in a little bit on some of these. And what I want to do is start off with signals, because I really think this is one of the keys to a lot of retailers getting to that next level. And one of the things that's always surprising to me when I go and visit customers is how few retailers actually are even doing basic clickstream analysis as part of their search. And yet it's one of the things that above adopting Solr itself can really drive a much better interaction with users, much higher conversion rates, et cetera. And so one of the things that Fusion does out of the box is give you native support for capturing and processing a wide variety of user feedback. We have customers who are putting upwards of 300-400 fields or columns into Fusion. They have billions and billions of events going into Fusion, ranging from your traditional clicks and add to carts and conversions to things like time on page, time to first click, various other attributes, geolocation, all of those kinds of things. We've done plenty of work integrating in with sites like Omniture, Site Catalyst, Google Analytics, Hadoop systems. So if you already have data in there, It's pretty straightforward to import that into Fusion. And then most importantly, what we do is we ship with some ready-to-go models for clickstream boosting and recommendations and all of that kind of stuff. So if you happen to be a retailer that doesn't have strong data science or any data science team, we have algorithms that we designed to work out of the box and be good enough for most people in most situations. So they'll often just give you a lift right out of the box without you having to go and do any additional work. But most importantly, even with those, you can take and extend them once you get up and running, once you have more confidence in how those things work, and then take and apply more features, more functionality to it. And the beauty of all of this signal stuff, especially from the DevOps side, is the deployment and putting this all into production is exactly the same as putting your core main catalog into production. All of this data is just yet another document in yet another collection. So that means it's searchable, that means it's facetable, all of those kinds of things. And in fact, I'll show you some of this in the demo. In terms of our signals, I thought I'd put up a few of the places where we often start when it comes to signals. So things like, obviously we need your full product catalog. That's a no-brainer when it comes to search. But you can see on the list here kind of some of the common things to start with. Our out-of-the-box model will take things like timestamp, user IDs, queries, clicks, etc., and build a search relevance model off of that. We can also then take those kinds of things and extend them. Most importantly, what we're seeing more and more common with our retailers is building out more sophisticated models that bring in not only what document was clicked on, i.e. the user went to the product detail page, but then also bringing in weights around what's the likelihood of adding this to the cart, what's the likelihood of converting, all of those kinds of things. And then we take and turn that right back around into Fusion, into Solr, and do searches based off of those things, or bringing those in such that you get both content-based matches as well as signal-based matches. Some other things that are nice to have in this space, and again, we can go out to a much wider set of fields even beyond this, but starting to bring in things like ratings, things like what did the user actually see before they clicked. That can be useful. Bringing in things like geolocation, pricing, inventory, margin, any other really business-specific goals. Like I said, we have some customers who have several hundred attributes that all are at least potential features in learning what users care about and then deploying that back into the search engine. And it's really these signals then that start to feed into how do we build a much smarter system, a cognitive system, to use the marketing hype term these days, an AI system, if you will. And this is where Fusion really starts to shine in terms of going above and beyond just what you get from pure open source, in that we bring a lot of machine learning capabilities to the table here. And the beauty of it is you can start with one of them and then you can grow with it as you get more experience. And the other really cool thing here is it's all designed to work off of that signal data if you have it. It can also, of course, work off of other data. But right out of the box, you start capturing signals. They feed into a collection in Fusion, and then we can start building out machine learning models. Some of the highlights here really are thinking about how can we leverage clickstream for improved relevance, for auto-tuning relevance. That's particularly effective for head and torso queries. Things like query intent classification is really helpful for trying to predict better what a user is actually asking when they type in the search box. At a minimum, in most large retailers, you often see that users ask, at least 3 or 4 different types of questions. One being they're looking for a very specific product. 2 being they're looking for a category of products, like phones or TVs. 3, they're looking for support. How do I make a return? what's my account status, how much do I owe, whatever is kind of in your traditional customer support. And then number 4 is usually kind of everything else, your spam, your spelling errors, various other questions that users ask of the site, depending on what kind of content is in there. And so one of the things that we've seen be particularly effective is leveraging a query intent classifier to help predict which one of those the user is doing. And then we can create much more focused queries from that to Solr to get better results. So for instance, if we know it's a category query, we might apply a category filter to the query up front. And I'll actually show you some of that in the demo. Other things that might be of interest here on the machine learning side, we know companies just deal a lot with how do I make sure I can match the language of my content with the language of the users. People often ask for the same thing in a variety of different ways. People want help in discovering synonyms and doing query expansion. Some of the capabilities in Fusion around that for essentially mapping out the conceptual space of your data is all available to you in there. Last but not least, we have support for A/B testing or multivariate testing. In fact, we take that to the next level here in what we call multi-arm bandit experimentation, which essentially allows the computer to analyze the data, the clicks, the way users are interacting, the rewards that it's getting from people, and then feed that back into the results and auto-tune the experiments based off of what users are doing. The beauty of all this machine learning stuff is it's all fully integrated into our index and query pipeline, so you can use this at both index time and query time. So again, that long circuitous route I talked about before, going signals to marketing, marketing to data science to engineering, et cetera. All of that stuff can just run right on Fusion, point and click, push the button, and you have models deployed, exportable up to production, all of those kinds of things without having to move, gigabytes or terabytes of data around. So that's kind of the machine learning stuff at a high level. Digging in a little bit deeper on the recommenders. This is a big new feature for us coming out in 3.1. We've added in what we call multimodal recommenders. And what do we mean by that? Well, we mean that we are able to leverage both content and collaborative effects to build out recommenders. If you look at most recommenders out there, they're either one or the other. They either look at the content and try to find similar content, or they only look at the way users interact with that content, but they're not aware of the content. So what we've done in Fusion is bring all of that stuff together, and you can essentially build out a number of different recommenders. You can overlay that content on top of search as well, such that you have what we call, like I said, a multimodal recommender. We have support for user items, so whenever a user logs in, you can recommend things to them. Whenever a user is on a particular item, we have item-for-item recommenders. This can, of course, also be used for other types of data. In fact, any type of data where you have feedback from users. So in our case, we also do query for query or related searches type as a recommender, and I'll show you all of this in the demo. And again, this same capabilities around recommenders can also then be used for personalization, right? Because we've built out this model of what a user cares about and what other users like that person have interacted with, such that you can build a personalized model too. And again, just like with all of these other features, it all deploys in exactly the same way. Just go deploy more nodes of Fusion, and now you have access to all of that data as Fusion content too, and I'll show you that in the demo. And in particular, what does that mean? It means all of the things you know about querying Solr, querying your product catalog, you can also apply to your recommendation data too. So you can apply filters, you can do facets, you can do restrictions, all of those kinds of things. And all of that's built in to the plumbing. I mentioned earlier, we try to keep people out of having to build rules, but yet at the end of the day, we know you need rules in an e-commerce system. In particular, sometimes you just have to have things be a certain way. What we don't want to see happen, though, with our customers is for them to have tens of thousands of rules and to have 20 or 30 people managing all of those rules and rules falling out of date and all of those kinds of things. And so we have a rules module extension that fits in with Fusion and builds out a number of key features for users to leverage rules. The beauty here, again, with the rules is they are all represented just as documents in yet another Fusion collection. So that means they're, repeat after me, queryable, facetable, all of those good things that you do with your core catalog. And then we've integrated that in with our pipelines such that, again, deployment is simple. And here's the best part of it is it's all extensible as well. So if you have a rule type that we don't have, you can plug in your own there as well. And of course, we have things like auditing and security and all of that supported. So much more modern rules environment. And again, if you plug that in with all of our other analytics pieces, you can track and see how effective rules are over time and get rid of the ones that are not performing. I mentioned a little bit of this before, digging in a little bit deeper on the business side. Fusion is BI ready, business intelligence ready. We ship with a number of out-of-the-box search reports and dashboards, but beyond that, we also offer full SQL 2003 compliant interface, which means your tools like Tableau, etc., all work. We also ship with a number of predefined jobs for common tasks, things like top keywords, top searches, top results, etc. And more recently with 3.1, we've even added kind of that next level of query analytics, looking at helping people find statistically interesting phrases, helping them build out those conceptual models of their data, helping them see where all of the spelling errors are coming in their data, as well as things like head-tail analysis, so on and so forth. And last but not least here, if you want to do your own math on this data, we have full support for, kind of the best-in-class data science capabilities, things like PySpark, Scala. If you want to do Java, you can do that. We also support a number of data science notebooks, things like Zeppelin and Jupyter. So in other words, all of the people within the company, your business analysts, your data scientists, as well as your engineers, should all feel very comfortable in Lucidworks Fusion. What does this all look like real quick underneath the hood in terms of architecture? On the right-hand side, Spark, Solr, and Zookeeper. Those are our open core bits. The beauty of those things are as engineering side of the house, or as the people on the engineering side of the house, you can go find on the web information on how those all work, and you can dig in. We, of course, have deep expertise here that we offer out to our clients as well. But you can essentially think about it as Solr is the core database, the core querying engine. That's where we keep not only your product catalog, but also your clicks, your machine learning models, etc. And that's what's being served up in production out to your users. Spark is where we do that offline large-scale distributed compute. That's where we build our machine learning models. That's where we build our recommenders. That's where we run our analytics. Zookeeper is, as I like to say, the thing that gets your DevOps team their nights and weekends back. It's the thing that makes sure everybody's up and running. It coordinates across a large number of nodes. So, for instance, as you want to add capacity around Black Friday or around the holiday season, you can simply register your new nodes, and Zookeeper does all of the work to make sure everybody knows what's going on. This has saved our customers countless hours in making sure that the system is happy and healthy. Moving to the left, our core services. This really is where we add a number of significant items of value on top of Fusion, or on top of the core open source. This really is where it falls into one of those two categories, either of how do we make building these applications easier, or how do we make asking questions of the data smarter, better, faster, et cetera. And so things like our recommenders and machine learning model fall into that category of smarter questions, and things like ETL and SQL and alerting and messaging and connectors falls under that category of how do we make it easier. Moving to the left, you have a couple of different interface options for getting into Fusion, REST API, a SQL API. We also have client APIs for things like Java, et cetera. We build out on top of that. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, the TwigKit acquisition that we recently did that we're calling the Fusion App Studio. And then from that, of course, you can build out whatever application you see fit. So that's Fusion in a nutshell. What I thought I would do now is shift gears and actually show you all what this looks like. So in terms of demo, I'm actually going to show an e-commerce demo. It's a data set from a public Kaggle competition. The most interesting thing about this is it's 1 month's worth of signal data that came with that product catalog. And I'm going to put all of that into Fusion 3.1. I'm going to showcase you not only core search, i.e. search from Solr, but then show you how we build out a number of interesting features on top of that, things like recommendation, clickstream boosting, query intent classification, so on and so forth. All of this is running in a pretty simple UI that we built using the App Studio. So let me switch gears to Chrome, and we can do the demo. If I can find my mouse. Where did it go? All right. First off, what I'm going to do is log in. And there's a couple of things to note here. And this is a standard kind of quote-unquote 3-page app, if you will. There's a home landing page, there's a search results page, and then there's a product detail page. I'll walk through all of them here in a minute. First thing to note is everything you're going to see here is being driven off of search, right? There's no database involved here or anything like that. We're just hitting Fusion query pipelines to get everything you see. And in fact, at the top level here, the first thing you're going to see is what I have, what we call our bandit algorithms, or our bandit optimization algorithms. And the way to see that is I'm actually going to hit refresh here a couple of times. And depending on what happens, you get back different results. So essentially every time I hit this page, I'm hitting a pipeline that runs an experiment that says, should I show tablets or should I show TVs? And really it's all up to kind of a probabilistic chance. And as a user, as I interact with this banner, if you will, the system will automatically kind of self-correct to showcase those ones that are more popular. There you go, just to see now. We've had tablets and TVs up a couple of different times here. The next thing to notice on here is down at the bottom is we have a very straightforward user item recommender in place here. Now, in this particular data set, all we have are UUIDs. So essentially randomly generated strings that represent the users. So I've just picked one of those and wired that in to match the user that I logged in with. But then it went off and got recommendations for that user. So this particular user happens to like video games. And so it's recommending various different versions of video games, video players, etc. So the next thing I'm going to do here is do an actual search. You can see we've got things like type ahead and all of that kind of stuff. And I put in my favorite query here, iPad. And as you can see, we get back your standard search results and all of those kinds of things. A couple of things to note. First off, this related searches. This is all just yet another search to a different collection in Fusion, albeit one that was built by our recommendation engine underneath the hood. I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. And then down the middle here, you can see I've got, a variety of results. And as I expect, most of you on the phone here are probably familiar with search at a pretty deep level. I think if you would agree with me that these results are okay, not great. And in fact, what I've done here for this baseline search is just query against Solr, and I've done a little bit of tuning of Solr results. And I've gotten back, what are reasonable results. You can see they match iPad, but I think you would agree that they're kind of missing something. They're missing, kind of that core intent of what the user was after or what I was looking for, namely the iPad. And so what I'm going to do first here is log into Fusion. And I'm going to just make a change to start leveraging those signals that I got that came with this data set. So I've logged in. I'm going to choose my e-commerce collection, and I'm going to hit the search box. And this really is where you manage all of the search interaction. And one of the first things I'm going to do is hit what is called a query profile. And a query profile just allows you to choose how a request is processed. And so that page, when I do a search, is hitting the default query profile, which is then hitting the e-commerce default pipeline. And what I'm going to do is switch to use a pipeline or a request processing approach that leverages signals. In this case, I have one built called e-commerce with signals. Now, don't worry if you don't know what those all mean just yet. I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But I want to hit the magic button of save, and I want to show you the results first. So I'm going to come back here, exact same query, but now just hitting a different query pipeline, this time one with signals turned on as well as rules and a few other things. And you can see now, I think you would agree with me, these results are significantly better. I'm now, basically what I'm doing is I'm still doing that core content search for iPad, but I'm overlaying on top of it, what do people typically do on the site when they search for iPad? And so then, kind of the last bit of looking at the front end part of the demo here is I'm going to click through on to the product detail page and show you the last bit here in terms of some of the capabilities that I talked about with recommenders, namely down here at the bottom, I now have an item for item recommender. So you can kind of think about it this time is, in the first case where it was users to item, the query was a user ID, and I got back all of the items recommended for that user. The second use case I showed you for recommenders was related searches. In that case, the query was the query and to the recommender, and then it returned back other queries. This third one is the actual item ID is the query, and now I'm getting back recommended items. And again, all of those things are hitting Fusion pipelines and doing searches against the underlying search system. Okay, so that's kind of the front end side of it. Let me then dig in. I promised you I would show you a little bit of what these look like underneath the hood. And then I want to show you a little bit around the rules, and then the demo will be done. So the way this works in Fusion, one of the things that we've been building out since 3.0 is what we call our query workbench. The query workbench really is designed to be that place where both search developers and other people within the organization can meet to understand what's going on with relevance. And depending on your credentials and what authorizations you have, you might have different experiences. Some people, for instance, can edit these query pipelines. Other people can just interact with the data and see what the results are and see why Fusion is doing search the way it's doing. So first off, kind of rewinding back to our very first search, you can see in the query workbench I now have that e-commerce default pipeline loaded up. And you can kind of think about it as request comes in at the top and then flows all the way down, hits Solr, and then flows back out. And so for those people who are familiar with Solr, underneath the hood, you can see that I'm doing kind of your standard Solr tuning operations here. I'm picking what fields in my content I want to search against. I'm boosting certain fields, things like, I'm saying that names are more important than descriptions and all of that kind of stuff. And anybody who's done not just Solr relevancy tuning, but any legacy search system tuning knows that you could probably spend a lot of time, kind of building out these boosts, maybe picking up different attributes, adding in different functionality around how to tune the underlying search engine, but it's a pretty manual process. And so one of the ways, like I said earlier, that we can short-circuit some of that process is by bringing in things like signals into the equation. And so the first one I'm going to show you is the signals pipeline that I used earlier. I'll let that load up here. And you can see that this one's a lot more sophisticated than our previous one. I still have things like my core search here. So you can see, I'm not pulling any fast ones in terms of our core ask of Solr. I'm still searching things like names and short descriptions and all of that. But you can see just here that I've got a couple of other things going on. The first one is when that query first comes in, so my search for iPad comes in, the very first thing I do is go hit this other collection called the signals aggregation collection. And that's where I store my model of what users care about in the data. So effectively what I'm doing is saying, here comes a new query, go look up what is in the signals data around that query, and then I'm injecting it back into the main pipeline, and that's what these roll-up and boost factors are. They effectively let me control how much do I care about how much users interacted with the data, right? So I've gone and got those signal information, and then I'm effectively saying, do I want that to be really important or moderately important or not, and, just a little bit of a boost. We then go downstream here. We feed it into our rules engine. There's a couple of stages here that also hit another collection, this time our rules collection, and say, what rules should I apply to this data? And I'll show you a demo of that here in a minute. And then ultimately we go and hit the Solr query, and up and out come your results. And in fact, one of the things you can do in Fusion here is compare these things side by side. So for instance, you can set up your two different pipelines. Let me scroll down here and find one of the other ones that I was looking at. Where did it go? Let's just pick one here. And then you can see how the results vary between them. Sorry, I'm missing something up there, but the idea here being that you can see side-by-side results, what's going on, what's different between the two, all of those kinds of things. And as we grow with Fusion 3, you'll also start to see more other information overlaid on top of this in terms of why results scored the way they did, how important were signals, all of those kinds of things. I want to show you one more pipeline, then we'll go look at rules, and then I'll just give you a quick taste of what some of these other collections look like, and then we'll have time for some questions. So kind of the piece de resistance of the demo is kind of this last query pipeline that I built that uses not just signals, but also machine learning, classification, learning to rank, which is a feature that's part of Solr, as well as rules to kind of build out this whole query understanding pipeline. And I'm just leveraging here an example of how you might do it. And so there's a couple of things to note here. First and foremost, I've got, I trained offline in Fusion a classification model where I took all of the data I took all of the user signal data as well as the product data, and I joined the two together and built out a training set that's designed to predict which query, what category a query most likely belongs to, right? So in other words, does this query belong to a movies category? Does this query belong to a computers category, so on and so forth. As with all good demos, looks like I've got a little bit of an error here. I'm seeing things loading up here. Let's give it 1 second. I think this is all running off of my local machine here, and the models are loading up as we speak. Obviously, in a production system, those models would be loaded ahead of time. So that's the query classification. Let me give that a little bit more here, and then I'll reload. The next step down the chain here is I've got a filter that basically looks at that classification stage and then simply adds an FQ stage, a filter query, onto the content depending on what category was predicted. So in other words, if this came in and said there was a tablets query, then I would then apply that filter to it. Let me just hit reload here because I think it's done loading on the back end, or I might be having a little bit of a demo error here. This is what happens when you work with the bleeding edge, as you will. These are features that are coming out in 3.1, which have not been released yet, so just bear with me 1 second. It was working earlier, as every good demo person says. And in fact, looking at the logs should be coming up here shortly. I've then got, after that catalog filter, one of the things I'm doing is turning on Solr's learning to rank functionality. Sorry about that hiccup, folks. Whereby, if you're not familiar with learning to rank, one of the things it does is take all of the attributes of the content and builds a model that can be leveraged during the ranking process at a very low level in the search engine, so that you can, for instance, this is really helpful when you want to learn features about content that you haven't seen before. You can build off of the features, not just the data like the signals and all of that kind of stuff. And so what you're now seeing in this pipeline, if I come back here and do my iPad query, see, I told you it was just thinking here. If I come back and I do my iPad query, what's going on is it's running through query intent. I'm predicting out that it belongs to a specific category. I then filter on that. I then go and apply learning to rank all the way down through. So in fact, if you come here, you can see how this changes. If I, for instance, turn off learning to rank, the results will change there. I apologize again. This is running on my laptop, which seems to be pretty slow at the moment. Give that 1 more second here. Or I could turn off, for instance, the other category filter and so on and so forth. So we'll let that just complete real quickly, or hopefully quickly. Looks like it's, I'm looking at the logs over on the side here. It looks like it is going through, albeit a little bit slowly. Meanwhile, why don't I just show the last bit here, which is the rules part of the equation. We'll come back to this here in a second. I'm going to go back to my UI, and hopefully this thing is still happy. And of course, it's timed out. Let me log back in. One of the things we have built into Fusion is a rule system. Those are all part of the built right into Fusion. We just keep the rules right in a Solr collection underneath the hood. I've set up a couple of rules in our UI. For instance, I've set up one called Black Friday. So if a user comes in and types Black Friday, we go off and still do a search for Black Friday, but we also return out a banner for Black Friday saying, hey, Black Friday deals will be available starting next week. And in fact, for the rules, what we've done is built out a simple UI for this, for helping non-technical users work with these rules. So if I log in here, you can see what some of these rules look like. And in fact, right here, number 2 is my Black Friday rule that basically says anytime the keywords Black Friday come up, show a banner. You can see here there's a number of other ones, things like filters, redirects, blocks, And ultimately what you can do here is also inject Solr request parameters or other pipeline parameters that you can use downstream in your pipeline. So, and then finally, just to finish that thought back off where we were having a little bit of trouble with the demo there, you can see I turned off learning to rank, and now I've got different results here. If I turn off the filter on the query intent, you would also see that I've got different results. It's gone from 5,000 some down to, or up to a lot more than that. And again, for some reason, this one's taken a little bit of time here. So anyways, with that, what we will do is switch back. If you want, you can get in touch with me and I can show you a proper demo here once I figure out that piece there. So with that, I think that concludes the demo portion. Let me just go back to the slides, give you a few links, and then we've got time for a few questions. So Aaliyah, if you want to jump into the question portion, happy to do that now.
Great. Thank you, Grant. We do have a few questions in just a few minutes, so feel free to continue entering questions into the chat box. If we don't get to your question on this session, someone from our team will reach out to you. So the first question that we have for you, Grant, is, can Fusion provide promotions or recommendations customized for individual consumers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely the case. One of the things we do is, you can capture all of that stuff as content. The user item recommendations I showed in the demo at the beginning of the demo on that landing page was one example of that. You can also leverage that data in the pipelines as part of other queries so that you can, for instance, inject user preferences into the main search. So for instance, when they do iPad, you might inject items based off of rules. You might inject information based off of what other users have done, but you also then might inject information based off of preferences of that user. So for instance, if they're a luxury, if they like luxury brands, if they like value brands, if they like, if they like sporting goods versus jewelry or whatever. All of those things can be captured as part of that personalization recommendation engine and then fed, either queried directly or fed into the main search items.
Thank you. Can you manage promotions to begin and end on a certain date?
Yep, I didn't show a lot of details on the rules editor there, but one of the key parts to that is it has, in fact, let me just see if I can bring it up. It does have timestamp information on it such that you can say how long these are triggered by. You can have add date, start and end dates and all of those things. And in fact, as I promised underneath the hood here in the demo, for instance, these rules are just stored as Solr documents. And so all of the things that you do for search are all available to you as part of the rules engine here. And in fact, the other part, now that my machine is back and happy, is you can see here in the another collection we have, for instance, those related queries searches here, those are all just yet another collection. In fact, things like the signals, the item similarities, all of those things are just collections in Fusion that you can go and query just like you query your core product catalog.
Okay, so we're just at the top of the hour, so we are out of time. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we'll reach out to you. If you have any outstanding questions, feel free to send us an email at events@lucidworks.com. Everyone who registered for this session will receive a link or an email shortly with a link to the recording and the slides. Thank you, Grant, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you.